innovations. All these developments are only possible when various players come together. And let's hear from our panel how different stakeholders will be influencing the growth of innovation in maritime Singapore. The panel discussion will be moderated by Brian Koh, Director of Corporate Partnerships from NUS Enterprise. He will be joined by Ng Yi Han, Director of Innovation, Technology and Talent Development from MPA. Toh Keng Ho, Business Development Director from Inmarsat. Sean Horn, General Partner for Motion Ventures, and Keith Ng, Founder and CEO of Performance Rotors, also an alumnus of SmartPort Challenge in 2019.
And do remember that you can participate in the discussion by submitting your questions and comments using the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen or via the Facebook comments if you're watching through Facebook Live. So now with that, over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Jessica and Ning, and welcome everyone, our partners, friends, ladies and gentlemen. I also want to welcome our distinguished panelists, and we really look forward to the next half an hour to gain their insights on the Singapore maritime innovation landscape. Let's dive straight into discussion. And this discussion that we talk about in the Singapore maritime innovation landscape really came about also because Inmarsat came out with a report paper on startup and innovation ecosystem Trade 2.0 Singapore. And let me just hand the session over to Keng Ho, who can then give us some key insights to share from this study itself. Keng Ho, please.
Hi, thanks, Brian, and a good afternoon to everyone. Very happy to be able to share a bit more about what we have done in the study. So Trade 2.0 is a series of our studies looking at the status or the state of the maritime industry across many different segments. So we have actually also done one particular one in Japan, and we'll be rolling out other similar reports. So the main gist of the report is really to highlight Singapore's unique position and unique situation. So one of it, of course, to keep it simple, I will probably highlight three main areas so that you can get a quick understanding of the report if you have not read it yet. So one, of course, is Singapore's uniqueness in our innovation advantage. So one of it, of course, is always mentioned, our bridge between East and West. The other one is also a very large number of immigrants and that the culture of innovation. And of course, the power of proximity. We are very close to a lot of markets and a lot of emerging trends in the space, which allow us to prosper. The second one is the uniqueness of Singapore, especially with a setup like Pier 71 and the Smart Port Challenge. We think, and we are very much in line with Pier 71, that is really an excellent accelerator or excellent bait for innovation and progress and development. And of course, also support from the government, such as the Hunt for Deep Tech with the kind of funding. And also the presence of a lot of early adopters, such as, example, Eastern Pacific Shipping, which we think is quite forward in their looking, in their perspective. And also, lastly, the third point is that the space is also growing. So the maritime industry is also growing, especially in the space of the merging between maritime and technology. And also the efforts by the government and also different organizations such as the Maritime Decarbonization Center, I think are evidence of that kind of growth and the kind of commitment that we see. So on those 3 points, we see that very uniqueness situation that created the startup magnet in Singapore. So we continue to see potential for that growth. And in the report, we also highlighted a few very interesting startups that we have looked at, we have monitored. And I mean, the best part is definitely to take a quick read and to let us know your comments and your feedback. Yeah, over back to you, Brian.
Keng Ho, thank you so much. And one of the things I like about the report, as you started off, you actually used the story of David and Goliath, and Singapore being the David here to have won giant Goliath. I thought was so apt, and although sometimes I'm not sure are we really the David in that sense, but certainly the analogy is very useful. Let me move on to MP, and I'd like to direct now the question to Ihan. Has the vision and the milestones of MPA to grow a vibrant maritime innovation system in Singapore changed? And if yes, how has this changed, and what else needs to be done? If you could give us more insight in this. Ihan, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. Those calling in and viewing this video from Singapore, as well as our international audience. Welcome to this to the launch of the Smart Port Challenge 2021. So on Brian's question itself, I would say that the innovation ecosystem continues to evolve and mature. I think as what you have heard from our guest of honor, Minister Chi, the Singapore Maritime Innovation Ecosystem is supported by a very rich maritime cluster. We have more than 150 international shipping groups, more than 5,000 maritime companies situated in Singapore. And we have a very structured way to curate and bring in the various different innovation stakeholders to come into Singapore to participate in this innovation process. So this could be through the maritime innovation process, including this Smart Port Challenge, as well as call for proposals that we can bring in to link demand users with solution solver groups together. What I would say in terms of what has changed or continue to evolve in Singapore will really be how we continue to enhance the innovation infrastructure. So previously, we have launched the Maritime Innovation Lab in Singapore. The Innovation Lab allows the startups and technology players to access industry data in the port in real-time basis, allowing them to provide good solutions that can allow them to provide ways to solve some of those pressing industry issues. This is also further complemented and supported by the launch of our Maritime Data Hub a few years ago. As you can probably hear from our announcement at the Singapore Maritime Week just back in April this year, we have also launched the Maritime Drone Estate, which further helps technology players, startups to find innovative ways to deliver new solutions, even as the regulatory landscape is being developed and enhanced, so that innovation and regulations does not impede some of this necessary innovation development work. Moving beyond that, we also have built up a richer ecosystem whereby the environment is now no longer limited to government related fundings, or also funding from only a few maritime companies. We have brought in a diverse range of maritime accelerators and incubators to join us within this space in the maritime sector. As you have mentioned earlier, players like Eastern Pacific Shipping, we also have PSA and players like Rainmaking, who have anchored some of these activities in the first place. Moving beyond that, we are already seeing other venture capital players and corporate venture capital companies such as IMC Ventures, MOL Plus, and Motion Venture coming into play. So we really see the ecosystem being enhanced and maturing over time. And as what we will think, what is going to be our key development here is really that, as what the minister has mentioned, we hope to grow Singapore into the Silicon Valley for marine tech. Marine tech being our new hype word for maritime technology. So we really hope to be able to attract more players within Singapore as well as internationally to come and participate in this innovation journey with us in Singapore. Yeah. So that's all I have for now. Thanks, Brian, and back to you.
Yeah. Ihan, thank you so much. And yes, there's a lot happening in this whole landscape in what SMSG has said in marine tech itself. We're all very excited about this whole area itself. Just for the audience here, I just want to remind you that if you have any questions, please post your questions to the chat function. I see a question and I just want to quickly try and answer them in between if we can afford the time. So the question is really, in the Smart Port Challenge 2021, only for companies or individuals as well. I would really say, well, we encourage companies to come in, but if you're interested, do put your name in and we'll see how you can be involved in that sense. Now, coming back to some of discussions over here, SMSG mentioned having the right environment. And he talked about the 3 areas: access to market, access to technology, and then access to funding. One of the driving force to fuel a good startup ecosystem is investments. So what more better than to get Sean from Motion Ventures, to give us a perspective. What is Motion Ventures' outlook on the investment in the maritime related startups in Singapore? And what attracts you currently and what is also lacking? If you give us some of your insight. Sean, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. First off, really nice to see so many people here today. I'm really happy to be here. I think in short, my take, it's fantastic, right? And I'll tackle outlook on investment in a couple of ways. So I think the first way is from an investor perspective, and then I'll also talk from a startup perspective. So from an investor perspective, we're seeing more investors look at Singapore for maritime startups, right? So for example, we had IMC Ventures, a Singapore company starting up a venture fund to invest in maritime startups here. And then if you look at the other end of the spectrum, internationally, we have MOL Plus, which is the venture arm of MOL, setting up here and partnering with the ecosystem to drive more collaboration here in Singapore. And I think this is amazing because that means there's more capital flow in Singapore, and that will naturally attract more talent for sure. From a startup perspective, we have a Singapore company called Greywing that just graduated from the prestigious Y Combinator, right? So Greywing, it's one of the first maritime company in the last few years to graduate from YCOM. And for those that are not familiar with YCOM, it's one of the best accelerators in the world based out of Silicon Valley, where they've accelerated Airbnb, Dropbox, and Flexport. So there are a couple of things to note here with this. One of the best global accelerator, YCOM, that can pick from any sector is now paying attention to the maritime space. One of the best global accelerator that can pick from any geographical location is picking from Singapore, right? So to me, that's like a really big indicator that we're going to see more talents coming in. We're going to see more solution in this space. And then Brian, you asked me a little bit about the attraction and what's lacking. So the attraction here is not surprising at all, right? That's amazing support from the Singapore government. Enterprise Singapore seeds capital, supporting Motion Ventures as a co-investment partner, and also other people as well to spur growth capital into Singapore. The Decarbonization Center by MPA is a huge attraction for corporates and also in the public sector, which are natural consumers of startup technology in the space, which in turn spins the wheel to attract more startups. And so I love the vibrancy so much. What I'll say is that what I think we can do next is to create a maritime global framework on where we see the industry going and what's needed to solve that. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one, we can lead the way in terms of aligning how different countries, different organizations globally can come together and have the same goal and solve similar problems. Secondly, it's to bring clarity to other entrepreneurs that are outside of the maritime space on exactly what is needed to tackle problems here, right? And so the more clarity they have, the more they know if it's something they can do and embark on. So the Smart Port Challenge is an amazing way to do it. It's phenomenal. It's so good at defining problem statements with the corporates and also the MPA and many other organizations. I think we can go much deeper in sharing our knowledge of the types of technologies that have been tried for a problem statement, but maybe haven't worked out, or maybe had subpar outcome. And we can sort of crowdsource that sort of information and share it globally to get entrepreneurs outside the maritime space to attempt. And so I think this cross-industry innovation will be extremely important moving forward, in my view.
Sean, thank you so much. And wow, that's wonderful to hear about the framework. And certainly, MPA and NUS Enterprise is developing and expanding the current framework that we already have into looking some of the areas that you've already mentioned. In fact, I kind of like your example about YCOM and how that intersection between what YCOM is looking in maritime tech as well as in the location of Singapore. That's wonderful to hear. I want to move on to Keith. Keith has been a part of our earlier cohort of the Pier 71's program, and not originally from the maritime industry. Keith, if you could give us a bit of your experience thus far, both in terms of your challenges as well as your opportunities. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you for the invitation. I think it's fantastic what we are doing here. Coming from as an outsider, right? The world of maritime is very confusing, if you like, for us in the beginning, because there's a lot of players involved. Yeah. For example, you take a vessel, you have owner, you have charterers, you have the management people, and then you've got within those organizations, you've got different people that you need to talk to as well for a startup to get a foot in. Yeah. So for outsider company like ours, there is a learning curve that we need to overcome, if you like. But what we are doing down here right now, I think it's really fantastic because as some of you may know, I recently just came back from the Netherlands because I went there to open a new office of ours. And what we are doing here for innovation actually caught their attention. And the innovation people over there, they tell me that they lost some attractive startups to Singapore. And they are sore about it, but they are quite impressed as well. So I think what we are doing is getting attention of the world. There is no better place to start. I think as an innovation company ourselves, we looked at what today's technology can offer. We see that in maritime, there is still a lot of things that can be done, compared to how things are done normally, manually in the past. A lot of coordination work, a lot of phone calls, a lot of what ifs. But now you have AI take over, you have all sorts of real-time information that you can work on. So there are a lot of opportunities as far as from what we can see as a startup. I think as a startup as well, a concern would be, I think it's universal with all startups, right? There will be runway, and then there will be revenue opportunities. So for runway, I think now we are doing a great thing, as mentioned by the speakers before, that we have a lot of venture capitalists now sitting in. IMC formed a new one as well. Yeah. And it's through this platform, for at least for us, we got one of our investor is actively taking part in Pier 71 as well. I just saw our friend from Vopak inside the list of attendees. So this is open. Everybody is here. It's the right place for any startup to be. It's a huge, it's a very big leg up, if you like.
Keith, thank you so much. And you mentioned the right words as a startup. The runway and revenue and all these, because ultimately these are things that will make a difference for startups.
Indeed. And as besides the revenue as well, I think this is a good place because different parties are here. It serves as a very initial matchmaking process, if you like, with the problem statements being shared and the startups giving their solutions. So it's great.
Anyway, congratulations on setting up your Netherlands office, because one of the elements that we want to see in this whole ecosystem is not just to remain in Singapore, but the ability to internationalize and globalize in that sense. One of the elements that you mentioned earlier, and this has been discussed on the whole area, is that whole element of community, because we don't want to remain on our own, but we have to be integrated with the global scene itself. So let me just put this question back to Yihan. What do you think is the next milestone to achieve for the maritime innovation community in Singapore? What are these areas that you think and see as pertinent in moving forward?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Yeah, in terms of the next milestones of what we can expect for the maritime innovation scene, I would say that I echo some of the points brought up by the earlier panelists. In particular, I think what is important is that for this whole maritime innovation process to grow and sustain and further amplify, it is important that it is not constrained just within the community, the maritime community itself, but really how we can bring this to a wider audience beyond Singapore at the international level. So I think that there's a lot of interest and partnerships that we've been building up with the different players beyond Singapore, be it in Europe, in China, and the likes of that. So the interest is really to see how we can bring in more stakeholders, more venture capital players into this. And beyond the maritime sector itself, we are increasingly looking at the supply chain players as some of these digitalization efforts string more of these stakeholders more closely together than before. And I think, as mentioned by some of the panelists earlier as well, we are also looking at going beyond just innovating in the areas of digital technology and solution, but going very strongly in the areas of sustainability. In particular, we are looking at how some of these innovation approaches could be directed to enable the industry to decarbonize, to meet some of the targets of the International Maritime Organization. So we really welcome and hope to hear from more of the industry on their requirements and challenges towards the maritime decarbonization statements, and also how we can bring on board more solver communities to come into this space as well. So on that note, we want to see how in the next phase of development, the startups and our R&D community, in particular our universities and our research centers based in Singapore and also partners abroad, can work together to bring some of this deep tech technology to translate them into viable commercial solutions that the industry can adopt. And on this track itself, I think we have taken some baby steps in the sense of also helping the startups to grow and progress. So as Minister has shared earlier in his opening address, we have launched the Mint Startup Scheme, helping the startups to be able to get access to funding to conduct their proof of concept development, as well as subsequently to scale up some of their solutions beyond to broader, bigger markets. So I would say these are some of the key areas that we are looking at as part of the next phase of our development. Thanks, Brian.
Ihan, thank you. Thank you for the insight into how the community plays an important role. I want to now come back to Keng Ho. Given the current pandemic situation, and how do you think the area of connectivity, internationalization, and globalization that we've been talking about, and I know Inmarsat is doing a lot in this area, have on the impact to our Singapore maritime innovation landscape?
Thanks, Brian. Yes, definitely at the onset of pandemic, I think we quickly realized the importance of connectivity to maintain the links between the crew, the seafarers, together with their family, and also with operationally between the ships with the office. So at the onset of that, we of course started to look at what else we could do to help. And then of course, very quick fix were how to support better call, how to support the use of video conferencing on limited bandwidth, and supporting them through our partners. So we built a ecosystem of what we call certified application providers. So through that, we hope to rope in more innovation and more specific digital solutions to help our customers as well as seafarers. So that's one approach we did. And as you can see, we have crafted some press release around that. We have worked with one partner called Vegan, which looks at telemedicine for the seafarers. So moving on, we are hoping to work with more partners and to bring up more efforts in terms of digitalization in the space. On that, we are happy that actually a lot of our partners are also graduates of the Smart Port Challenge, and they have participated actively in this space, which is why when the invite from Pier 71 to speak today, we were very happy because we see that there's a lot of alignment and a lot of synchronization between what we intend to do and what Singapore and Pier 71, as well as the larger Maritime Singapore, is trying to do. On the international part, we feel that Singapore is very well positioned, because while we are in the APAC region, and we are close to a lot of the major markets that are developing very strongly in terms of maritime and in terms of ship tech. So we see ship tech being a very large part of the growth in the maritime industry. So of course you can look at other digital solutions, you can look at port technology, but we see ship tech having a lot of potential, but also ship tech having a lot of challenges that requires a lot of improvement and innovation in connectivity, connecting the ships, delivering maybe even IoT solutions and so forth. And the growth in areas such as this is quite rampant or quite fast in areas like Japan, Hong Kong, Korea, China as well, and Taiwan, and Singapore being sort of a midpoint between East and West, and also a very popular bunkering spot, makes that whole thing very interesting, because you could have owners that are in Japan, but you realize that a lot of time they end up doing a lot of work, in terms of technology or in terms of commissioning systems in Singapore, because of the convenience of the period during bunkering and so forth. So while that is a very small point and a small thing, it sort of highlight, sort of like a very snapshot of really the value of Singapore as a midpoint between East and West, both physically and also, I mean, beyond physical, and also, how should I phrase it? Never mind, I shall not belabor that point. Yep. So yes, so that's all I have, Brian.
Yeah, Kengo, thank you so much. And yes, the whole element of internationalization is so important. We have a question here, Gabriel from TCNS, and his question is, he's curious about what the panel feels biggest barriers to uptake of innovation, and many maritime companies have been around for many years. Do they view startups with apprehension? What can we do to help startups gain more credibility? I know this is a very big question actually for everyone, but if I could direct this to Keith, because you as a startup, if you could look at it from that perspective, give some insights, and then maybe at the concluding discussion that we have, if each of you can also give a perspective of what you see in this area itself. Keith, can I just direct this to you? Thank you.
I think this is a very hard question for me to answer. How do I prove? I mean, at the end of the day, what a startup can do or can't do, we have to be honest in the start, right? At the very beginning, to show what we can do and not try and wing it. When what we can do has been proven with one, for lack of better word, trial. Example, when we first came out, right? Somebody tried our solution, because drones is not a new thing. Before we came about, there were 101 drones company out there that claimed to do confined space flights, without GPS, without anything. So a lot of people has had bad experiences. When the drones come along, it fails, right? So it also takes for us, it takes that one or two company and say, okay, let's not give up yet. Let's give the startup a chance. Let them come and prove it. So once that door is open and we have done it, we have saved that party, reduce risk, reduce cost, reduce time for inspection and things like that. What we do then spreads out. People will hear about it, and it's very normal that, hey, if you save that company X amount of dollars, I want to have that benefit too. So can you please come and do it for us as well? So I think it is at the end of the day for the startup to just really work hard and grab the opportunity, prove yourself that your solution works and your solution benefits all stakeholders. Yeah, it cannot be something that just benefits the startup and not the other stakeholders. It will not work. It is something for everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. And Actually, you've done it. I mean, reason why I directed this question to you, I apologize to put you on the spot, but it is a difficult question. But I think because you have done it and you have, developed that credibility, not just with partners, but with the other stakeholders as well. So, once again, congratulations on your expansion. Time is running out, and this has gone so quickly. And but I want to, in our concluding statement, I mentioned earlier when we started off how the report, the Inmarsat report, used the analogy of David and Goliath as a analogy of how Singapore has actually conquered the maritime innovation landscape. Coming back to that story, if many of you know this story, is David, when he went up to Goliath, he didn't want the armors and everything else. What he did was he just had 5 smooth stones and his sling, and then he won Goliath with just 1 shot. So if he started off with 5 stones, he's used 1. There's actually 4 more stones left. I want to put each of these stones to each one of you, the panelists, and tell me, with the remaining stones given to each of you, what would be the one thing needed to bring the Singapore maritime innovation landscape to the next level? Let me direct this first to maybe Sean, if you don't mind.
No, I'm happy to take it. Thanks for the really good question. If I had 1 stone, I think about how can we continue creating a strong, vibrant ecosystem, right? And then how do we define a strong, vibrant ecosystem, right? And I think it's largely really the density of the different clusters that the different panelists spoke about, whether it's startup, corporates, government, VCs, and then how connected these clusters are. So for example, Motion Ventures brings its own cluster, right? We have a cluster of corporates, we call it the corporate consortium, and then we see high engagement between our corporates and the startups. So the question I really want to tackle here is how can we combine our different ecosystems together, our different clusters? So how can I work with Ihan on Decarb Center? How can I work with King Ho on the research? How can I work with Keith? And also beyond that, I think that would be kind of like my 1 shot at trying to make the ecosystem stronger to increase survivability of startups, and also which without a doubt will definitely attract more talent to solve difficult problems in the space.
Thanks, Sean. Yes, and certainly pulling everything together would be very important. Ihan, can I ask you what would you use that stone for?
Yeah, Brian, thanks. I would say that what we will want to do is really to see how we can broaden some of this innovation application and use cases, not just to serve, say, the maritime sector, but also to connect all the other related adjacent sector, bring together how the broader supply chain can be more efficient, be more connected, basically transforming and providing new business opportunities and creating new ways of conducting trade and shipping in fundamentally, I think, new ways, so that we level up some of these opportunities and activities that we can conduct. So I would say is really to strengthen some of this collaboration, not just in terms of the quantity itself, but also the quality, and expanding the impact to reach a wider network of audience.
Jan, thank you. And certainly, we often say the maritime space itself in innovation is just not limited to the maritime space, but the link up with land transport, with air, and many other elements. So, that whole connectivity, we don't stand alone in that sense. So yes, thank you. Keith, can I just ask, what would you use as a startup, for that last stone?
I would use it to cause a ripple. I would like to attract the attention of all the other startups out there, because the reason being is that we can't do everything. I mean, the success that we have today is not Keith, right? It's the whole team that is there. But we are, as a startup, we are also limited in resources. We are limited in manpower, and we do not have the solutions for everything. And we do not want to overextend ourselves and to be able to have all this I would love to use that stone to cast ripples so that all the startups can come together and say that, hey, we have part A, I have part B, that guy has part C, and together we form a consortium, and the solution that we can then provide to corporates, to end users, will be complete and whole, a turnkey solution if you like, rather than being fragmented, like trying to do everything and being run over.
Thank you, Keith. And yes, really, as one of the things that I didn't get to ask you, which I wanted to ask from a startup viewpoint, how do we make this maritime tech space sexy in a sense? I think you've answered that question. Keng Ho, over to you. How would you use your last stone?
Yes, so I really like what Sean and Keith talk about. One is the collaborative nature of it, and also pulling in the strength of many different players to deliver something for the customer. So I would use that stone definitely to have more collaborative arrangements between different players. It could be large corporates with startups, startups with startups, or even groups of any kind of combination, even with academia. Because this is also one of the fundamental principles that we have been doing with our certified applications provider scheme, as an example of how we are pulling them in as a partner. So not necessarily with a very complex consortium agreement, but as a partner, and we introduce actually their solutions to our customers. So we see that the collaborative part, whether between two parties or more parties, is definitely very essential for in the maritime innovation to continue. And Keith rightly pointed out, the space is very complex. You have ship owners, ship managers, charterers, and everyone has their own KPIs or their own interests to manage, and it's sometimes very hard to be very truly aligned together. So definitely I want that stone to do that. Just like today I chose this picture of the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. I hope that we'll write on Singapore's innovation success and make the Castle run in less than 12 parsecs.
Keiko, thank you so much. And there seems to be a consensus right across on this whole thing of being connected together, collaborative, which actually speaks very much of the very point that when SMSG gave his opening remarks, and he talked about creating the 3 I's, which is being integrated, being innovative, and being inclusive itself. And really, what all of you have mentioned really speaks of the 3 I's that we're talking about. So ladies and gentlemen, time is really running out. It's gone by so quickly, but we thank you for joining us for this SmartPort Challenge launch. And I want to, would you join me in thanking the panelists, Ihan, Sean, Keng Ho, and Keith. Thank you very much.